Are you sitting there right now using a PC with an overpriced operating system while you eat unhealthy ramen? Well, I apparently have all of the solutions to your life. Go to Vite Ramen right now and get their healthy protein-filled ramen for 10% off with offer code Broken Silicon. And then go to CDkeyoffer.com to get 25% off all Windows keys and use Die Shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Microcode Update Tom.
And I'm your co-host, non-existent Macrocode Update Dan. I just wanted to draw the distinction between micro and macro there for no reason.
And that there was really nothing you could have said to be in the same vein of what I said.
Yes.
No, I don't know. If I were you, I was like, well, I don't know. I'll just say something we're going to talk about. And I assumed it would just be like 9700X, but it wasn't, because what I said really didn't make sense. And that is because we are starting late, because there's just been, you know, right now I'm trying to expand the Moore's Law Instead team. There's been some teething issues, but actually today there's some exciting updates too. So I'm not going to announce anything now until it's official. And I think people know that this channel is a channel that doesn't tend to like hype up what we're going to do ahead of time unless it's 100% or after it's happened. But you know, I think there's some exciting things coming to the Moore's Law Instead YouTube channel by the end of the year. And I mean, there's been some shorts put out. Those are going to keep happening here and there. They're interesting, Dan, YouTube shorts. I never really watched them that much, but it is interesting how, unlike if you were to post, I don't know, 3 versions of the same video, although I know some YouTube channels basically do that could really hurt your views because people just stop clicking. But shorts clearly are just like these boosters that appeal to people who don't usually watch other stuff and then loop them in a way that I think people sometimes hope normal length YouTube videos will do to their podcast. They will seem to do it better. It's interesting. So a lot of learning going on over here.
Yeah, I don't really know how the world of YouTube Shorts works. I know they're trying to be the next TikTok, and well, if TikTok gets banned,
TikTok's the next YouTube, more like remain the first TikTok.
Well, no, but they're trying to take this theme out of TikTok by recreating a similar environment on YouTube. So I haven't engaged with them that much, but I don't know. It's not a bad avenue to go down.
And I'm learning, without going into it, the weird rules to making shorts and the weird restrictions YouTube puts on what you can do when you upload a short. Some might argue quite arbitrarily. You'd think, wait, I just upload this, click short instead of normal video in the menu, and then just change whatever I want, right? No.
Well, I mean, they have their little tabs, so they're trying to kind of treat them as if they're 2 separate apps. So,
but you would think when you upload, you would choose the tab, and then it is no, not really, not always, and it depends on which app or platform you use. But so yes, lots of learning here, and let's continue the learning by learning what we said that was wrong in the past with the corrections. Crash writes in and says a clarification on loading microcode for CPUs. There is a mechanism by which Intel could distribute microcode without requiring a BIOS update. This is known as a OS microcode update. The main downside of loading microcode this way is that it will not persist across reboots. It's not saved. So it is the OS's responsibility to load it correctly every time. That said, both Linux and Windows already use this mechanism to load Spectre and Meltdown fixes by default, so it's not strange for your OS to already ship with dozens of Intel and AMD microcode fixes. I thought that was a good correction to include here, because I know we were talking about the microcode update that we'll, of course, talk about more later on in the episode, about how this will be done in a way that everyone gets it. I believe I kind of waffled a little bit on being sure on it's like, yeah, they can put it in a Windows update, but I don't exactly know how that works. That's how it works, Dan.
Okay.
I don't know. Let's save that for the discussion later. Coach Freddy writes in and says, in your Zen 5 video, you mentioned Tom's hardware showing a 20% uplift. I think it was 21.5% on Zen 5 over Zen 4 in gaming. Well, the chart references the entire test suite, including a pretty large number of productivity tests. their review still showed pretty middling uplifts in general. So Carbon Cry handled this one and said that's just not true. When I saw some people saying that online, because the way Tom's Hardware words it is a little odd. It like says Geomean, then FPS, then 1080p. But if you, according to Carbon Cry and Karen Osagata, contributors from Moore's Law, said they looked into this and they averaged some things in. No, QH Freddy, that is the average uplift for 1080p, which Tom's Hardware found was between the 7700X and 9700X. 12% uplift in 1080p, 9.4% in 1440p, and now you turn on PBO, it becomes 21.5% 1080p, 16.7% 1440p. And I think that 12% is actually pretty notable too, because I think that's what we were pretty much expecting, you know,
over that 77. Yeah, that's right.
Based on the slides they put out there. So I guess that's one reviewer is roughly there. But yeah, no, according from what I could tell, double checking at QH Freddy, from what Carbon and Carrie could tell, that is not what it was. And in fact, if you look at some of the productivity uplifts, I mean, some of them were like 30 to 100%. So I think it would be even higher if it included those as well. But yeah, I mean, look, we're already talking about this. So let us get right into the first story, which, of course, what other story would it be but the one about the AMD R7 9700X and R5 9600X releasing to polarizing, though fairly often bad reviews. All right, let's see here. Last week, AMD released the 8-core 9700X and 6-core 9600X Zen 5 processors to, well, let me just read 3 different quotes from 3 different reviews to give you an example of how weird review day was. Quoting first from TechSpot or Hardware Unboxed, we're a bit miffed by the 9700X's overall performance. It seems rather pointless, and we can't imagine those X3D chips expected later in the year are going to be much different given what we've seen here. It was also shocking to find the 9700X slower than the 7700X in some games, and it's this inconsistent performance that makes the 9700X particularly bad, in our opinion, although I guess at best you could argue it is just underwhelming. Meanwhile, no one should be entertaining the 9600X at $280. It's been a great run for AMD, but this is the first time we've been truly disappointed with a new generation of Ryzen products. Right, one review there. Second one, here's some Tom's Hardware. The Zen 5 powered Ryzen 5 9600X and 9700X deliver large generational game improvements that exceed price comparable Intel models. The processors also deliver class-leading single-threading performance, but do still trail in heavily threaded applications, equaling prices because there's more E-cores with Intel. Overall, Ryzen 9000 delivers impressive generational performance gains, but it have a 40% lower TDP than their predecessors, ultimately yield a cool, quieter, and faster system. And I remember there were some quotes of them saying exceptional gaming performance. Right, now let's quote Phoronix. This could quite well be my simplest review in the past 20 years of Phoronix. The Ryzen 9000 series, starting with the 9600X and 9700X, are truly great desktop processors. The generational uplift is very compelling, even in single-threaded Linux workloads, shooting ahead of the Intel 14th Gen Core competition. Across nearly 400 benchmarks, these new Zen 5 desktop CPUs impress. And these new Zen 5 desktop processors are priced competitively. I was already loving the Ryzen 7000 series on Linux with its AVX512 implementation and performing so well across hundreds of different Linux workloads. But now that AMD Ryzen 9000 series is out, AMD is just hitting the ball out of the park. So yeah, Ryzen 9000 has gotten off to an extremely rocky start. Reviewers range from thoroughly negative to seemingly glowing reviews, as do the results of those respective viewers. This indicates there's probably some problem with how the chips are set up, with the BIOS and the OS, with scheduling, whatever it is. Even if it isn't intrinsically Zen 5's architecture, which personally I don't think it is, it still makes AMD and probably Microsoft look stupid. I believe a big culprit could be scheduling too, in that Windows may be screwing up, but with Zen 5, SMT is stronger than ever in many applications. However, it might not have a wide enough bandwidth to feed the double front-end cores due to still being 4 wide. And indeed, Windows did find that memory tweaks alone can give you notable boosts in performance before we even talk about PBO. And yeah, we got to talk about PBO. Der Bauer got a 21% improvement with the 9700X in Cinebench R23, ran it with a high PBO at 165 watts in this benchmark. Tom's Hardware with a more stock PBO setting got around an 8% improvement in gaming workloads, which is crazy. That's, I believe, a higher uplift than you get stock to stock, Zen 4 to Zen 5. So yeah, Ryzen 9000 is definitely being held back at stock settings. And even at stock, it should get better over time, not just as the early bugs get worked out, but also as workloads adjust to Zen 5's new cores. However, we must remember that with fine wine arguments, even if they might likely be true with Zen 5, it is never guaranteed, and therefore, it is not a good reason to buy Zen 5 right now, at least not these configurations. I'm sorry, AMD really screwed up this launch.
And once again, like to go back to for the fine wine comparison, that there are two types of fine wine. There is a architecture that's well designed for the future, and it eventually grows into that as it ages. And then there's the fine wine that is, we screwed up this launch, and and it started out bad and it got better as we fixed it
with updates. Yeah,
this is what that one is. So
well, I actually think it could be both, Dan. If you look at AVX 512 performance, I mean, yeah, I think it's probably mostly the first one that you said, to be honest. Well, but it could be a double situation here, reminiscent of GCN, where the early software sucked, but also the architecture aged better. Again, though, we don't know it for sure, so it doesn't make you want to buy these now. Anyways,
I mean, yeah, I've tempered on this a little bit since I first saw the reviews, but like I think I talked about that a little bit on the Dice Drink we just recorded. Like I might end up having to get upgrade my system sooner than I wanted to, because I think the motherboard's starting to wear out. But the early reviews I saw for this kind of just convinced me, well, I don't know, I should just get a 7800X 3D. And as time has gone on, I'm a little bit more back 50, and forth 50. On that now, because I could wait to get a set and see what the 9800X 3D is and hope my system lasts long enough, or I could just go up to Minneapolis in the next couple of weeks and buy a 7800X 3D. And I'm not sure which one I want to do yet, but
I'd still probably lean towards just getting the 7800X 3D simply because I'm leaning
towards, but I'm more 50-50 than I was on day one.
But remember, if it improves, I'm pretty sure Zen 5 is going to go down in price. Looking at what's going on here, you can always just sell the 7800X 3D probably for at least 200 used a year from now. And then what did you really spend net? $50? I don't know.
Yeah, because the thing that I'm sad about with all of these reviews is it really doesn't look like this is going to drive Zen 4 prices down that much. As a matter of fact, I think Zen 4 is going to drive Zen 5 prices down from their initial value, because what was at the 9600X is what, $280, or that's what they're saying it's valued at.
Yeah,
it's not worth that compared to what you can get with Zen 4, at least at this point, in my opinion. And that's kind of where I stand on this. Like, AMD, if they had tuned their power usage better than what they did, this could have been they could have hit this out of the park, but they instead did like this weird eco mode thing, or like the 9700X and 9600X seem to be running in eco mode, which seems to be at one of the worst parts of the power band. So it's like, it actually kind of oddly looks not that power efficient if you do the right comparisons. But if they had tuned it to like 95 to 105 watts, Zen 5 would have had glowing reviews, I think.
Yeah, or at least far more consistently, at least good. I mean, yeah, me and you were looking at some power band stuff some people have been testing, and I think it was like at 65 watts, almost smack at 65 watts. This 9700X,
55 watts if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I think I think that's where the data point was, and I think it was like literally a little above that, like literally right about where they've clocked this thing. Yeah, you're right. It was probably 55 watts. Because Hardware Unboxed found the 9700X was like, I think 5 to 10% more efficient than 7700X. I think is that what I remember. Don't crucify me if I misremembered people. But like, so if you think about it, then yeah, so it's actually the least efficient kind of at the bottom of the power band, and unless you go really low, which I think we also kind of found with Strix. And then once you get to 95 watts, it's decently more efficient. And if you get to 170 watts, that's actually when it's the more like of an efficiency gain. The
efficiency delta, yeah.
And so you have to go like, not only should they have at least done 105 watts, I can't help but go, maybe they should have done 170 watts. Maybe they should have launched something that in some reviews was trading blows with a 7800X 3D, but that's not what they did. And yeah, at a minimum, I think what we can say is that the way they configured this was stupid. It should have been called the 9700 and been $299. If they really wanted to be aggressive, or it should have, I still think 349 and been at least at 105 watts so that it gives you that around 20% uplift that Linus Tech Tips actually and Derbauer and Wendell and Tom's Hardware found.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. All I see from this launch is the underlying tech isn't bad by any means. It's probably could have been advertised as being significantly more efficient than what it actually was, I mean, than what they released. And for some reason, there was a failure in communication somewhere, or a failure in, I don't know, validation or wherever, and they instead decided to release whatever this was. And if you're reviewing things at stock, yeah, it's going to look bad because it's not that great at stock.
Yeah.
And there's value in reviewing stuff at stock because that's what most people buying these are going to use them at. So,
well, that was an argument I made in my reaction video to all of this is, yeah, but this is like, and I'm sure as usual, the usual reviewers are having to deal with countless flame wars from fanboys from both sides. You know, you make Zen 5 look good, you're an AMD fanboy. You say AMD doesn't look good, you either, what the people are saying is you're incompetent at testing apparently or something, which is just ridiculous. Were PBO to be the main argument, which it should be. I did a whole video on it. It's supposed to be. That's on AMD to put in their review guide. Make sure you test this. And it seems to me like they didn't, and maybe nudging people to try faster memory. Because if you do both of those, the thing seems to perform 20 to 25% better than stock and still crush Intel in efficiency. It's just, I really have to say this. You know, we had a really, I think, very good die shrink episode that we did last week, you know, continuing to talk about what our initial reactions were to Zen 5. I'm glad we did that before this broken silicon so that we weren't screaming and just swearing or something. Like, we let off some of the steam before we did the more public-facing episode. Although if you subscribe to Patreon, you can see how mad we were in the initial reactions. But I think what's very clear is that you can't just blame marketing. Project management needs to have some heads roll, because it's not marketing that decides when they launch it. They can push them, you know, they can say we should do this, but it's really both the people that tried to market these chips. And I still think even with the PBO and RAM factor, I still think they probably played up how good the gaming was too much, frankly. So the marketing people really need to get thrown out of the company for doing this kind of a little bit again what they did with RDNA 3. But ultimately, it is pretty close to what the performance we should have expected is. And the project managers that said, hey, you know this architecture that's at its best when you push power and you do professional apps? Let's lead with the one chip that won't do that. I mean, whoever came up with that decision needs to be fired, Lisa. You need to fire these people. They are making your company look like a clown show when you have the best product. And it's just, and even just, I still can't get over it launching first, both from the perspective of that's dumb in and of itself, but it's not like the 9700X is launching a week before the 9950X. I mean, a month before. It's a week. So what does a week matter? Do not have it. If you'd have had the 9950X out at the same time, you'd have had your best product being portrayed first, and then they would have said, look, the 9700X is also efficient. Now all they focus on is its performance, which isn't the part you want to use for focusing on performance.
And it's clearly the winner of their lineup for the past two generations has been the 8-core Vcache chip. Why isn't that out day one at this point? Like, or
at least announced, like have a chart out that's like, hey, by the way, this will be coming out in, I don't know, October. And it's going to give you 30%, up to 30% more gaming performance or whatever it's going to be. And that way in every review, they would go, but we have to remember this isn't the gaming focused one. Take this chart at 30%, AMD is going to crush it. Instead, people aren't talking about the best gaming. They're not talking about the best multi-threading chip. They're not talking about anything that you should be focusing on to make Zen 5 look good. Product managers and marketers at AMD need to be fired for this. This is ridiculous.
It's just a weird thing that AMD does where, like, these are, at least for some time, these are going to be the two weakest CPUs in their lineup. Maybe we'll get non-X iterations, but I don't really see a purpose in non-X iterations this generation. Nope. So I kind of hope they don't.
If they do, it will truly just be a de facto price drop.
Yeah. So like, there isn't going, or there shouldn't be anything worse that comes out, or weaker that comes out from this generation. And like 8-core is the big thing that's being pushed as the best gaming processors right now, when in reality, like, that's the bottom, second worst chip that they're going to put out. Why are you leading with that? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And I guess this will be the time where I say, full disclosure, we are recording this before the 9950X and 9900X came out. Yeah. We decided if we wanted to hold the episode and then like end up releasing it end of, Wednesday night or Thursday morning. But ultimately, especially with this, first of all, we have tons of news. We have more stories in this than usual. We even had to cut some we were going to do for time. But so I don't think we need any more to talk about in this one. But also, I think it might take a day or two to let it all sink in. With how polarizing and different the reviews were for the 9700X, I'm glad we didn't wait to look at it and then try to rush out a response. I'm glad we had that full day for me to put a video together and really think about it. And then, so that's what I will say about that is you'll see our reactions in a podcast or video that comes out when the 9950X launches. For now, we're just going to focus on this and focus on answering a question from Diplomaticus, who says, hey, Tom and Dan, the 9600X and 9700X seem to be showing significantly larger performance gains on Linux. Do you think Windows applications aren't making good use of the architecture changes? And if so, could this improve in time? Yes, absolutely. Whenever I see that, same thing with early Threadrippers, I think that without a doubt, something here isn't, well, I think it's twofold. I think something here might be wrong with how these things are being utilized. We had, Tech Power Up found if you disabled hyperthreading that you get 3% higher gaming performance or something. There's like 2 or 3%, I think. And annoyingly, a lot of people spouted something like it's a fact that isn't. They went, well, that's usually true. No, it isn't. Zen 2 had lower performance if you disabled hyperthreading. So there's a scheduling issue here, I think.
Well, that's inconsistently true. Like I've had CPUs that are better at gaming with SMT, and I've had CPUs that are better without SMT. Like that's just,
and the trend has been that it's better to leave it on because they put so much effort into just having correct scheduling with whatever stock settings are going to be. So no, I think there's either something here. I've heard theories of they did something where they're trying to I heard a theory where perhaps AMD's scheduling multiple of the first threads, if you're not running full multi-threading, into the first 2 cores, and then that's so they can not use the other cores and it uses way less power. So that'd be something you'd want to use with Strix on desktop. That sounds stupid. Maybe they need to add a new power profile that not only raises the TDP, but does the thing that they usually do, which is dynamically pick the fastest boosting core pane around the top thread. Maybe they aren't doing that. But additionally, I think there is just a chance that the microcode or what Windows is doing with scheduling isn't optimized for Zen 5. It is quite a different core. It has 2 front ends. So hyper threading effectively. It's significantly higher multi-threading boost if you properly use them, but it is different. So maybe Windows isn't scheduling properly.
Yeah.
So I do think it's definitely linked to both of those things. I would expect it to improve over time. But again, that doesn't change that you shouldn't buy it now. Alpha Space writes in and says, you mentioned that Zen 5 is more aggressively priced than Zen 4 at launch, but you, and I think most others agree, that the 9700X and 9700X are not really the successor to the X's of before, but more to the 7700 and 7600. Therefore, because they share the same TDP, and those only cost $229 and $329, considerably less than their 9,000 counterparts. Yes, I know that the other ones exist, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so I don't entirely disagree with your argument.
No, I mean, it's more just a matter of, well, what specifically are we talking about? Are we talking about the actual piece of hardware being put out? Because, yeah, he's kind of right. Are we talking about the branding? Because they're, for some reason, trying to brand this as the exit of the 6 and 8 core.
Infinite Valence writes in and says, is the 9000 series the moment, though, where AM5 and DDR5 makes sense for a platform upgrade from an old AM4 and DDR4 platform? I actually kind of think so. The 9700X and 9600X both provide mainstream pricing with class-leading thermals, class-leading power, and class-leading overclocking headroom. If you're an average user, light gamer, what other CPU offers better balance of price, performance, and power? I don't really see the disappointment or the flop perspective here. When I look at the data, the single-core performance is generally top of the charts, 1% lows are top of the class, and the lowest end part offers reasonable gaming at 4K with only 6 cores. The tests and charts often show AMD matched or beating Intel while using half the cores at a third of the power. It's just crazy. All that is before we even talk about the fact that the only safe generation to buy right now from Intel is 12th gen, and those things don't come close to this in performance or efficiency. I think there's a fair point here, but that doesn't change that there's no point in getting this over a 7800X 3D.
Yeah, that's my problem with is
long term. Absolutely, yeah.
We can, I think it's very obvious at this point that AMD is just competing with itself. But it's just the 9700X is currently slightly more expensive than the 7800X 3D, so I don't know why you wouldn't get that, or save money and get a 7700X or something if you don't care about having the absolute top performance, because you could really make a similar argument with the 7700X, because that's also relatively top charting performance. I mean, if we're looking at all of the CPUs that you can currently buy, I think people are disappointed because it's not really an improvement over their last generation as far as performance goes. At stock, yeah.
Yeah, unless you use some really specific apps. So wait, oh wait, is the X actually cheaper than the non-X? I think that's often the case. No, the same price, basically. But now that it's warming up outside, Jessie couldn't be happier to be jumping around every day in the warmer weather. And you know, it's good for me too. Running around with her, teaching her tricks, that's good for my health as well, not just hers. But all of this gallivanting, well, it takes up time and it pressures me to make my lunches quicker to get moving faster with Jessie every weekend afternoon. And usually quick means less healthy. Well, unless you know about Vite Ramen. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Vite Ramen is a healthy, tasty, and shelf-stable food crafted by an American startup that offers a ton of options for eating healthy, like their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice, and then also their Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break away from home. And I do need to take a second also to remind everyone that they don't just make ramen. They also have Nano Boost Vitality Powder that I honestly think blows away the health powder competition. I literally drink this any night a broken silicon is recorded extra late instead of coffee. And they also have a collection of silverware and accessories that are always high quality. Like the Goofy Girl DM Nakiri knife, I tried it out. It is insanely sharp. It is probably the nicest knife this household owns. So not just the ramen, although the ramen's great. Everything else on there is high quality, and that's why I've been working with Vite Ramen for so long. I actually like their products, all of their products, a lot. I've never tried something they made that wasn't good, so check them out. And remember that even just clicking on the link in the description helps the channel a ton, and buying some of the special packs through that link helps you save money and support the channel even more. So support Moore's Law Z by checking out Vite Ramen today. Yeah, so I mean, I guess here's the question, right? You'd go, you know, and I have made this argument in the past week, because as I often do when a new CPU comes out and people are like, look at this. And it's like, well, good Lord, guys, you're talking about stuff that is like 5% away from each other in gaming performance most of the time. Does any of this really matter? Okay, but if you think that, then why would it matter if there's a small difference in gaming between Zen 4 and Zen 5? If your argument is it doesn't make a big difference, but it's good at these other things, I'd say it's just save more money. And the R5 7600 on Newegg right now is $182. So you can save $200 basically, or almost $200 going from the 9700X to the 7600. I'm sure you'll be able to sell that used for $150 at some point, you know, or at least $120. And so I don't know. If you're going for budget, I don't see why you would get this. And if you're going for, you know, you want a lot of multi-threading performance, I mean, the 7900X and 7900 are getting so cheap. They're like almost the same price. And their single threading at stock isn't that different. So again, it's really just a screw up in configuration and positioning at launch.
I mean, yeah, I just think neither of these are compelling CPUs unless they're $50 cheaper both. Like, I guess that's my summary is they need to both be $50 cheaper.
Justin John writes in and says, given that Zen 5 IPC improvements were only 16%, which, by the way, I have to point this out, AnandTech tested for IPC, and they got pretty much, I think it was like 14 to 26%, depending on the workload. And so what's clear is the IPC test you would usually use, Spec Int and Spec, or I should say Spec 2017, it lines up with AMD's IPC claim. So that's again something that gives me both. They just played up gaming performance too much. It is a decent IPC uplift. It's just not a Zen 3 like IPC uplift. But then also, I still think something's wrong, you know, with how this is being scheduled. Anyways, going back. So do you think Zen 6 will be reduced smaller to get rid of compact cores? No, I know for a fact that's not happening. Or potentially up the core count finally across the board? Maybe. How big of a potential IPC increase do they expect with Zen 6 offering up a potential IO die and layout? Don't see Intel keeping pace with only potentially offering IPC improvements of single digits being enough. Well, we know that Lion Cove is at least 14%. AMD winning on IPC. So, I mean, I've already leaked, you know, and again, remember, this is the only channel that got Zen. Well, not only, there was also some guy in a forum, I guess, who was close, but but I guess that's not really a channel. The only channel to get the IPC correct for Zen 5. And the same sources that got me the correct IPC for Zen 5 expect Zen 6 over 10%. Where do I think it will land? Honestly, there's a part of me that makes me wonder if it will be like 15% or something again, just because Zen 5 seems to have fallen flat. But yeah, I mean, they have higher core count CCDs. I know about 16 core ones and 32 core CCDs. I don't think the 32 is for desktop, probably, but it is plausible they could be going to 32 cores. And I mean, I think Zen 6 could feel like a much bigger generation. Like, remember Zen 2, I believe their IPC uplift was like, was it 14%? I don't remember. It wasn't like giant. It wasn't as big as Zen 3. And the big thing with Zen 2 was the clocks were like a little faster than Zen Plus. It had a good IPC.
Scheduling was a lot better on
it was. Yeah, scheduling was a lot better too. The IPC was good, but not better than Zen 4 or something, really. But what did it have? It doubled the cores. So especially if Zen 6 falls into the 10% IPC uplift category, I think if they doubled the cores, though, everyone would remember it's so much better than Zen 5.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what people want. That's what they're jonesing for, is another doubling of cores, Tom. Even though I don't know how many people are actually going to benefit from that. Or for gaming, I don't think it'll do that much unless you can get 16 cores on a single CCD. That would probably be pretty beneficial to gaming.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing is I don't know. I don't know the die sizes. I don't know which node they will choose to use because they're using both 3 and 2 nanometer, I still hear, depending on the product for the cores. And I don't know like how, like, so I don't know if like, I don't know what will they, because a theory I have that what if they use a 3 nanometer CCD, but then there's only one of those and they use that for like the, I guess we would call it today 9700X and down. Then they use a smaller 2 nanometer CCD and you can go with 2 of those, the top end of the stack or something. I don't know, you know, and then, but because they may have just 2 different versions of node being used for the same core count for some CCDs as well. It's really interesting. But yeah, anyways, QH Freddy writes in and he says, how bad will it be if Zen 6 isn't on AM5? I think it'd be pretty bad, actually.
I would be pretty angry if it wasn't. So
I mean, they basically said it will be. I've heard it should be, and we'll see how Zen 5 goes. I guess there is Zen 4 is a pretty controversial launch too, and it ended up selling gangbusters. That's true. Yeah. So I wouldn't write it out yet, but I think there's a lot of people that look at Zen 5 and go, I don't need it, and then if Zen 6 requires a new platform, they're going to be pissed.
Yeah. I mean, AMD is really building itself on the like long platform longevity brand. So that's what they need to work on. I mean, they need to be committed to that.
Yeah. I mean, they had 4 generations on AM4, 1 plus 2, 3. Some would argue kind of 4.5 because of X3D. I wouldn't, because it wasn't a full lineup. Well, I guess you could say there is 5.5, Dan, because what about the 4000G series? Sorry. But yeah, so I think when you look at this, it would be weird if they didn't at least go to Zen 6. Although these bandwidth problems, and they want to up core counts, I don't know. Makes me wonder if they need to. Glass writes in, he says, WTF is AMD doing with their new 800 series motherboards? Why even release these at all? There are plenty of USB 4 X670E motherboards that are having good sales right now. Yeah, it's weird to me too.
Because their partners want to sell something new. Like honestly, that's my answer, I think.
Yeah, were they to do the configuration a little differently, like I think there just should have been 870, 850, 830 or whatever. And like, but they're calling 870 and then 870 Extreme is really the successor to the top, and the other one actually has less PCIe lanes. I don't know. I think it's weird and almost borderline dishonest.
It's more brand shrinkflation, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, kind of is. All right. Speaking of shrinkflation, I don't know if that really, I don't
think that counts.
That really applies to this actually, but that's what the segue is going to be for story number 2, 5900 XT and 5800 XT review. Now I'm quoting here from Hardware Unboxed, and then of course move on to my own editorialization. All right. So there you have it. I'm sure very few of you will be shocked to learn the 5900 XT isn't a rival to Intel's 13700K when it comes to gaming performance, despite AMD's untrue claims. Bad benchmarks and highly misleading marketing materials aside, is the 16-core 5900 XT, what a weird name for that, worth considering? Well, unless you were already in the market for a 5900X, then the 5900 XT won't really be of any interest given that it's the same product, more or less. The 5800 XT is probably the least exciting AM4 CPU to be released in the last few years, on the other hand. This 8-core is just a horrible value. There's simply no way you should entertain this thing at $250, even if you're already on AM4. It just makes no sense. For $180, you can get a 5800X, $170, a 5700X, or for about the same price or less, you can get a 5700X3D. And so there you have it. With the 5900 XT and 5800 XT, AMD continues to position the XT suffix to mean irrelevant on Ryzen. In many ways, the Zen 3 XT parts are even more ridiculous than their Zen 2 counterparts. I believe those like upped prices and added 2% performance. And there's no world where these really make any sense to buy at all. So Dan, what did you think about the oddly named 5900 XT?
Well, I'll say when we talked about it earlier, I thought it was a confusing naming, but looking at the performance, I get why they're calling it that. I don't know. I was surprised, but honestly, like based on what I saw from the announcement, I was surprised at how bad these were. I really don't get why AMD put these out. Like, they make zero sense to me.
Yeah, the only products that would make sense to me, that they've already done the 5600X3D, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I guess after that, launch of 5950 X3D. I mean, you could do that. And you could also just release like a 5920X or 5900 XT that actually is just 12 cores, but for a far lower price than we're seeing here. And then truly the 5800 XT makes completely no sense. I do not understand why this exists.
Because it's just a worse, I mean, it's just a more expensive 5700 X3D that's worse. Like, that's pointless. I guess the 5900 XT, there are 3 people still maybe that are on AM4 that want 16 cores for productivity, but haven't just bought a 5950X yet.
For like used that's really cheap. Yeah, I don't know. I don't, and you know, I think we talked about this on a die shrink. Yeah, the weird benchmarks they used, weird, just dishonest, that they used when they announced these chips too, were just, I mean, I don't remember the details, but I know Hardware Unboxed tested it, and there's like some of the fine print was like they were using a 6600, I think, for some of the testing, or is it maybe a 6650 XT is what it was, and then some of the benchmarks like were games capped at 60 hertz. I mean, I don't know what's going on at AMD marketing, but why are heads not rolling? This does not help you get sales. I do not understand. And again, and the project managers who said we need to launch this and at this time.
Yeah, I really feel like Zen 4 has Zen 3 has a complete lineup at this point. You said the 5950 X3D Sure, I wouldn't be opposed to them.
Like, I'd probably buy it, to be honest.
But I really don't see what else they have. I mean, what else they need to fill out their lineup. Like, you don't need more 8-core processors. There's what, the 700, 700X3D, 800X3D, right? Is that all of them?
Yeah, I think there might be a 5500X3D as well. And now that I've said it, I have to look so no one calls me stupid. Let me see.
No, it's just there's no way.
Yeah, there's a 5500X3D. They've plenty of options at the budget area.
Yeah, there's no way to milk the 8-core tier though for Zen 3 at this point. There's one more CPU you could release for Zen 3, and everything else is going to look dumb. Like dumb product. I don't know.
Dumb. Yeah, I mean, I think it's time to move on. I really don't have much to say about this, but I thought, it should get its own story. Let us move on then to story number 3. Interesting Strix findings from the Fox. The Fox's continued investigation of Strix Point proves what we already theorized in the launch coverage, that Strix Point is a deeply lopsided APU. He found that while the CPU is starved of power, it needs a higher TDP to justify its 12 cores and really let them stretch their legs. The integrated graphics are instead starved of bandwidth. It seems and thus offers much improved efficiency when dropping TDP as the speed of the 880M and especially 890M comes in line with the bandwidth that it feeds it. So what all of this means is, and this is bizarre, by the way, the wider 16 CU core of the 890M, it makes it crazy efficient at low clocks, but then it loses its advantage at 17 to 25 watts. And then around 33 watts, the 12 CU one basically ties it. So if you had a 10-watt handheld, you'd probably just go with the 880M yield if it was because it's like 5% worse or something. But then when you go to 17 watts, you get worlds better performance. But then in the most expensive products that would go to 33 watts, all of a sudden it's not much better because it's out of bandwidth. So I would say this actually bodes extremely well for handhelds that usually target 15 to 25 watts. But yeah, I'm sorry. I think this proves like Strix is really impressive. It's really interesting. Obviously, it's the best APU on the market right now, obviously. But I can't help but think that they should have given this 10 cores, not 12. And I think maybe the amount of CUs is okay, but they should have added 16 megabytes of Infinity cache here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's the band bus width again?
It's just 128-bit like most of the APUs. Or all of them. Okay.
I mean... it's just more really weird stuff coming out of AMD. I don't think the 370 or 365 are bad APUs by any means.
No, they're great.
And like you said, yeah, the 370 might be great, or however they rebrand it for handhelds might be great. But it does make me question, like, the power profile. Like, depending on what laptop you're buying, you really need to consider what your use case is going to be, and if you should just save some money and get the 365 instead of the 370, in my opinion. Although while watching that video, I thought it was interesting. The Fox pointed out that you can only buy the 32 gigabytes of RAM model of that Asus laptop and if you get the 370, which to me says, well, these discussions are already going on behind closed doors. Like, hey, you need to provide an incentive to get the 370, and you can upsell them for the 370 and getting more RAM. When in reality, if you're using that thing at 33 watts, really the only convincing reason that you would want to get the 370 over the 365 is because you get 8 gigs more RAM.
You mean 16 gigs more RAM, right? Or is it 8? 24 to 32?
It's 24 to 32.
Okay. Yeah. So, I agree with that. Yeah, it basically becomes, what is your laptop going to run at? What are you going to use it for? I would want the CPU to be boosting pretty high so that when I plug it in, or even just on the go, I know that I'm not going to get bogged down. It rarely happens with my 8-core Hawkpoint tablet, but it can when I have 100 tabs open editing on a plane or something with rendering. Like, it can get a little slower. Not much, but a little. So I'd probably want the full 12 cores there. But then I want to make dang sure that's a 45-watt chip and not a 28-watt chip. Now, if my focus was gaming and it's a 28 or even lower, I'd go, 365 is fine.
Yeah. I think that's a better way to put it. If this is primarily gaming, 365 is probably just the better thing to go with. Obviously, you have, what, 2 more cores with the 370, so it's going to be better multi-threading. But if
you are at the right TDP,
yes,
though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why I hate that they've kind of removed the TDP, terminology or the names for like U, HX, HS. Like, I'm mad that they've gotten rid of all of that, because now the branding, just like what Nvidia did with their GPUs, is confusing and you don't quite know what you're buying. Now, I guess with something like Asus, they offer different power profiles, so you can kind of switch between all 3 of them with that laptop, so it's less of a problem. But
you know, it's funny too. Speaking of power profiles, Minis Forum V3 has power profiles, and I'm wondering what chip they should choose for their tablet, because they have a 28 watt one and a 18 watt, I believe it is, or no, 22 watt, and then there's a lower one than that. And I you know, of course, hacked it pretty much, kind of hacked it so that it pretty much is running 30 to 35 watts most of the time. And from that perspective, I'm like, ooh, I hope they go with the 370 so that I can have that CPU performance. But on the other hand, I go, I don't know. I think a lot of tablets are just going to go for the 365 to save money. Yeah, unless you can't give it more RAM, which I don't know if AMD is going to tell them you can't give it more than 24 gigabytes.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, yeah, I don't know. For a tablet, I don't know. I feel like 365 is probably good enough for most of them, unless, once again, you're going for a more handheld thing. Then, oddly, the 370 is the better thing to go with.
Yeah, I know. Depending.
Yes.
Alpha Space writes in, is there anything new you could share about Kraken? It has been quite a while since we got an update on it. So yeah, remember Kraken was first exclusively leaked by this channel, I believe. Was that a year and a half ago already? I think or what was that? Let me see.
I don't remember.
If I search Kraken, it'll just pull up my video, because that was the first one that everyone still references it. Let's see. So this was it was last year. Okay. So we're looking at almost a year ago. Kraken was leaked, and I have learned a few more things behind the scenes about it. I'm not ready to leak it yet, you know, because I would want to double check everything before I say something. And look, with the microcode stuff and Zen 5, there's been so much news that I just haven't had time to really get to it. But what I will say is I do think it's going to be, you know, Alpha Space, your question, if we're boiling it down, probably is, will it be good? What should we expect out of it? I think it's going to be really interesting. I think they're basically trying to cost optimize a successor to Hawkpoint, and that Escher is a cost optimized, like, even smaller Hawkpoint, almost replacing Little Phoenix. So you'll see a situation where right now, here's what excites me about Kraken. I know they're using Zen 5 and Zen 5C cores, and because of that, you could see them probably squeeze more CPU performance into a smaller die area for the CPU, because the overall Zen 5 CCDs aren't bigger than Zen 4 CCDs. And so you could see them go, okay, well, half of them are, I've heard actually weird rumors of what the number breakup is, but I'm not going to get into it now. Maybe we can make this just a little smaller, but, you know, or around the same size. But because Zen 5 is higher IPC, it's overall a better CPU. And then with the GPU, I think they're going to try to, probably a smaller GPU, because it's RDNA 3.5, and because seemingly for the bandwidth, you don't even need that many CUs. I think they're going to make something that basically is Hawkpoint, but cheaper, but a little stronger. And why I think that's really exciting is right now Hawkpoint is going into like $700 laptops. So they might bring something more efficient and better than that. I mean, you know, with a decent NPU, or maybe they'll just, now that I think about it, those cost savings may be eaten up by the NPU, but still, it's taking Hawkpoint, giving it a modern NPU, better CPU, comparable GPU. That kind of seems like a Qualcomm killer. Now that I think about it, it will probably be launching pretty close to when Qualcomm launches $700 X Elite laptops. What a coincidence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that will be great in $600-700 laptops.
Yeah, I think it, and I would wonder how many people like Minis Forum just go with that. We'll have to see. All right. Now, let us finally pivot from AMD, from controversial AMD news to controversial Intel news. Intel reports disastrous Q2 2024 earnings. This is story number 4. All right. Quoting first Pat Gelsinger. Our Q2 financial performance was disappointing. Even as we hit key product and process technology milestones, second half trends are more challenging than we previously expected as well. Then Dave Zinsser, Intel CFO, said, second quarter results were impacted by gross margin headwinds from the accelerated ramp of our AI PC products, higher than typical charges related to non-core businesses, and the impact from unused capacity. By implementing our spending reductions, we are taking proactive steps to improve our profits and strengthen our balance sheet. We expect these actions to meaningfully improve liquidity and reduce our debt balance while enabling us to make the right investments to drive long-term value for shareholders. Yeah, Intel's financials have been a slow-moving car crash for years, and I think now we're starting to witness the actual impact. The fact that quarter-on-quarter graphs seem okay, by the way, that kind of looks like it's flat, isn't good when you consider they've been doing flat poor for many quarters in a market where all of their competition is booming. The only segment, in fact, in which Intel can achieve some income and, more importantly, profit is client, which is an area where a new storm is brewing from AMD and Qualcomm. So I have to say, people should expect many more cuts soon. I don't think this is the end of the bad earnings call saga with them. But even now, before more cuts are probably going to happen, they're planning to immediately shed $10 billion by, and I'm quoting a lot of this here from Gamers Nexus reporting, who says that what they are hearing the breakup is 12,000 jobs in non-fab. There goes the rest of the good design. Well, I don't know if I should say good, but already I know the design teams are being stretched thin. They're about to lose 12,000 of those jobs. They're also cutting 3,000 in manufacturing part of the business. And Gamers Nexus also heard estimates as high as 19,000 employees total getting cut, higher than what they've reported, which is similar to what I've heard in the past, by the way. They'll report one number, and really it's like, oh yeah, but that's right now. They're going to do another whatever percent next quarter. I'm also hearing that it's probably more than 15,000, by the way. And the company also stopped its dividend, and in an internal all-hands call, this isn't alleged, I also saw this slide from someone else I talked to. Intel announced incredible cuts to benefits. They're removing fruit from the break room. So, by the way, one thing that has to be pointed out at the end of this, when Pat became CEO, he bloated it from 110,000 employees in 2020 to 132,000 in 2022. You can almost just argue that the jobs being cut are the people he shouldn't have hired when they were facing increased competition from AMD. And by the way, to compare, TSMC has 74,000 employees, and then Nvidia has 25, and AMD both have like 25 to 30,000 or something. So if you think about it, they had more employees than TSMC, AMD, and Nvidia combined. This was never going to go well, especially when they bet on GPU instead of AI, which is, I'm just going to start openly calling a dumb bet that's getting people fired, and not the people that caused the problem, getting employees fired, which sucks because someone high up had some pipe dream to make a GPU instead of AI that people actually were going to pay for. And yeah, some people are already calling for Pat to be replaced. Multiple people I follow who are analysts and investors are saying it. And I got to admit, behind the scenes, I'm hearing tons of people openly say that they think Pat maybe should step down as CEO.
Well, I mean, the good news is, though, based on that slide, Tom, they're maintaining the employee stock purchasing program. So if you're an employee and you want to buy stock right now, after they eliminate the dividends.
I mean, I guess if you get a good job at Intel, getting the stock buys now is a risky bet, but it's a bet that could pay off if they go back up in 5 years.
And if you're really confident that you can turn the ship around,
yeah,
go for it, I guess. But yeah, to me, it really feels like this is just years of them avoiding admitting that that they've been tanking, and this is them just being like, all right, here it is. Here's our cards on the table. We're screwed, and we're probably screwed for another 2 quarters at least.
Mm-hmm. Let me see here. Sarcastro writes in and says, Tom and Dan, I was surprised to see Intel suspending its dividend payout this quarter, considering I recall reading at least one article about Intel taking out loans to pay a dividend the previous quarter. Good God. Should just cut it then. I guess the I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today philosophy finally caught up with them. The toxic and infighting and the culture, that's what has allowed this toxic company to flourish and spawn toxic profits. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get why they were trying to, why they were taking out loans to pay for for dividends, because that's the only reason to hold Intel stock right now. I mean, there's no reason to buy Intel stock right now, and I'm curious if it's gonna like get hard to sell it at some point, because who would want to buy this?
Yeah, who's buying? Yeah, I mean, I guess
unless someone's shorting it now, but I don't know why you would buy.
People are.
I don't know why you would buy the.
I won't say who. I'm telling you, people are shorting this.
Well, I don't know why you would buy the other end of that short, is what I was going to say, but who knows?
I never agreed that you should. I mean, honestly, it was Alchemist was like, I'm holding the hammer over the nail. Meteor like was and nail in the coffin. And when I stopped recommending, and like, because I do some consulting that people like, I was like, yeah, I can see Intel going back, but I'm sorry, after seeing how Alchemist and importantly, and so two things in a row, Meteor like panned out. I wouldn't be making a bull argument for them, is what I would say. I would be saying, just wait at least a year, because they'll probably be cheaper, even if you think they're going to be fine. I
mean, the most optimistic scenario for Intel, I think, is 2 to 3 years of complete chaos. But
yeah. And I guess I actually do want to hit a point home today on this whole thing here. Like, when I put out that leak that ARC is effectively canceled, of course, tons of people were like just doing mindless cheerleading and saying they shouldn't do it. We need more competition. But what I explained multiple times, and by the way, since then, everything I've said was going to happen. The Alchemist launch was dragged out. The A580, I don't think, even launched for like a year, until a year after the initial launch. They even removed it from roadmaps and presentations for a while, oddly. Meteor Lake has turned out to be a bust. Alchemist Plus didn't pan out. Here we are in fucking August, and there's no Battle Mage, people, and still OEMs and AIBs tell me this shit's not happening. So I think and then like I said in the effectively canceled video, I think there will probably be some limited edition, crazy low volume launch of Battle Mage. It'll be late though. And then that's probably going to be it. That is what I continue to think is going to happen. And all the people that said, don't say that, you're hating, we need more competition. To them, I then replied, well, Intel's already kind of falling apart. So you guys understand what you're saying. If ARC doesn't succeed and they bet the farm on it instead of backing out as soon as possible, they could go out of business. Here you go, guys. All you people online that argued that ARC should do whatever it can, no matter what. And you know why you said that? So your fucking 4070 would be cheaper. You didn't say that because you're ever going to build an Intel graphics, buy an Intel graphics card. Guess what happens now? Tens of thousands of people don't have a job because you fucking told them to make the wrong bet and told them to stay the course for a product. You 4070 owners, you 7800 XT owners, you are never going to buy ARC, admit it. And now there's tens of thousands of people being fired. And I cannot believe the stupidity in the executive leadership. I'm just saying it. Doing all these dumb investments still. 2 years ago, they should have become a leaner company, cut parts of the company, and focus on their core business. And as you're about to hear in the next story, that's not going well either, because they wasted all this money on stupid adventures. But you know what they didn't waste money on? AI. Good job.
Yeah, I mean, it's baffling to me how much more effective smaller companies are than Intel at executing. Like Nvidia, I know and AMD, I know they're both fabulous, but like a fifth the head count. Well, less than a fifth the head count. Sixth the head count, and they're at least consistently executing on launches. Like, we were dumping on AMD for the first half of this episode, but you know what? What we really have that we were dumping on is 4 CPUs that they released, and guess what? All of them work.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Oh, and I forgot to mention this. I followed up with some of my retail sources before we started recording. Strix sales haven't slowed down. It's selling gangbusters. And it's because, yeah, it's still the best. Even if, like, I think Strix was probably launched a month before it needed to be. Probably could use some microcode updates and optimization in Windows, just like desktop Zen 5. But it's what people are going to buy. And anyone who's not going to buy Zen 5, they're just going to buy Zen 4 now. And then that's going to sell out. And then Zen 5 will be cheaper, and then everyone will keep buying Zen 5. And it's just such a disaster.
Yeah, because it's not like, oh, Zen 5 wasn't great. I'm now telling people to get a 14700K, because I don't know if the 14700K is going to fail within 6 months. And I don't know if that if the mitigations they put in place are going to do anything, because Intel can't prove that they can do anything effectively.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear about one thing here. To the people that call me an Intel hater, what I said would happen has happened. I wasn't an Intel hater. I was an Intel cheerleader trying to make, I was just, I like reporting the news. I'm not trying to get them to do anything really. But really, the reason I sound so mad when I do some of these Intel leaks or I talk about their decisions is because I'm mad that a company that was in all of my products and is now almost in none of them that I own is falling apart because I think it's important that they do survive. I'm not hating. I just want them to not go out of business. But these stupid decisions that many of you cheered for are making them go out of business.
Yeah, and now we might be in a situation where several years down the road with AMD versus Qualcomm or
Nvidia.
Or Nvidia.
They're making chips. They're just there's rumors out there too. They're working on ARM chips. ARM's on Windows is going to get better, right? I'm sure Jensen will somehow time it perfectly. Right when ARM works perfectly, boom, high performance ARM Nvidia CPUs will come out, and competition will be fine, guys. But there's going to be a lot less from Intel pretty soon, I think. Which, screw it, I guess. Perfect segue here to move on to the next story with story number 5. All Jesse wants is for Maurice to play with her more often. But unfortunately, he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to CDkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by CDkeyoffer.com and their back to school sale. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, CDkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with CDkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at CDkeyoffer.com today. Bartlett Lake is canceled and Royal Core is in trouble. Last week, yours truly leaked that according to multiple sources, Beast Lake is canceled. For those who don't know, this was first leaked over a year ago as an architecture with multiple designs being considered, with the lead one being a 4 times EBP, extra big is how it was described, 4 extra big cores and 32 E-cores. This was supposed to be the full realization of Jim Keller's Royal Core project with insane single threading via rentable units and a whole host of other cool things like, things I've leaked before like adamantine, which is supposed to be out by now. It's not. What's going on with adamantine? I don't know. And I've heard all types of other radical things they were going to do for higher performance. So Nova Lake was supposed to be an early version of Royal Core. Beast Lake was the full implementation of Royal Core. You can almost think of Beast Lake as maybe Zen 2 and Nova Lake as Zen 1. And Arrow Lake was Zen half, maybe? I mean, Arrow Lake was the bridge getting them there. However, I am told that Intel is just having too many problems with Royal Core. The full implementation Beast Lake is therefore canceled. And now the Royal Core project, it's not really canceled, but the way they were going to do it is done. There's a reason I didn't put in any titles, Royal Core canceled, because the things they were doing, which are multiple things to make this next-gen architecture, they're splitting it apart into different teams and hoping they can get at least one of the things working on time for some architecture in a timely way while they try to work on the other stuff. I don't know how that's going to go now that they fired all of those design engineers. But yeah, so to be clear, I'm not saying rentable units are canceled. I don't know if they will be. I don't think so, but they could be. It sounds like that's still probably happening, but a bunch of other things are falling apart. And I really got to say this too, closing this one. I think it is abundantly obvious that Jim Keller left too soon. They needed him there for an additional 3 to 5 years. He was only there for 2 years. And I know for a fact he left because he was tired of the political infighting at Intel and just the backstabbing. And I can't help but think, I think Jim Keller left like a year or two before Zen launched. So that means the architecture is completely done. He left right when they were going to the hard, maybe not even hard, just final validation and early, final hard design phase. It's it's done. It's designed. Make it, guys. And he left. I think he left before Royal Core was really finished being designed, and I think it's cost them badly.
Well, yeah, it's very clear. It just seems like it seems like every product they've put out since Alder Lake is them trying to like just bridge the gap to where they need to get to with Royal Core, and it just that gap just keeps getting wider and wider, and the bridges they try to build keep getting smaller and smaller. Like, yeah, if Beast Lake is canceled, then I don't really know what to expect out of Intel ever at this point. Like, I know Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake are going to come out, I guess, but that's all I have confidence in. And I guess Nova Lake probably.
Yeah, I think Nova Lake's still coming out, but you know, even if Nova Lake's coming out, I mean, one thing that I would say is I can't really bet on anything here when it comes to IPC I've leaked before about these architectures, because I don't really know anymore. Like, I don't think they're the same architectures I leaked. So many things have been canceled and moved around. So I don't know. I mean, I've heard, Nova Lake's probably still roughly what I've leaked, but I'm not married to the IPC I put out there before, or really anything as Intel that I've leaked that was years ahead of time. You know, we've already seen how Meteor Lake turned out as well. So that's just more evidence that I don't know if we can really trust that they're getting anything done correctly anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's very clear Intel from a couple of years ago was at least what they were putting out, even in leaks, was a lot more optimistic than they should have been. So, I don't know what to make of anything out of Intel at this point until the actual thing is out.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of things being out, let us now move on to story number 6 with the Intel 0x129 microcode update being tested. So I'm just going to say a quick spiel. I know you did a lot of research for this one, probably more than me, but quick rundown. I saw Jay's 2 cents, I believe, get around a 2% drop in gaming performance for Onyx, about a 5% drop in Linux apps. In Buildzoid, saw spike. The thing I'm noting from Buildzoid is that he saw spikes up to 1.55 volts. So small performance drops. I think there were some apps, I hope you'll tell me about it, that were much more than small. But my overall conclusion is that if you have Raptor Lake, install this update, most likely your performance won't noticeably be affected, and your chip is going to break in a month if you don't. And having said that, we're kind of only hoping it fixes the issue. I think there's a solid chance it's just mitigating it. We don't know if there is another issue besides voltage. We don't know if this voltage microcode change is fixing all the issues causing failures. And remember, we won't really know if the microcode update is working for 3 to 6 months. So I wouldn't jump the gun and say it's solved, minor performance drop, no one needs to talk about this anymore. We need to give it 3 months, and then we can make our conclusions. And still, again, Buildzoid found it boosting to 1.55 volts. That's still ridiculously high. I can't help but think that what this microcode update is, Dan, I suspect, is them just giving themselves breathing room. They're dropping performance, but not really, so that they can still hopefully look okay next to Zen 5 launching. And now I'm suspecting that with, again, 1.55 volts is still very high. What we're going to see is a lot of chips break a year from now instead of 2 months from now. Don't know for sure, though. And we won't know until we give it some time to see. Also, I'll point this out. If your chip was 90% towards instability, meaning you've been running an i9 at high clocks and voltages for like half a year, it's probably 90% towards degradation you'd notice. So I still think even with this microcode update that we're going to still see rolling chips breaking, that we're the ones about to break. And I wouldn't be surprised if, after Zen 5 is out and the reviews are done, they go, and here's another microcode update that lowers it more.
Well, yeah, and even if you like look at some of the stuff in like from Wendell's video is suggestive of that, like, because the breakage isn't like just a binary, it's working, now it's broken. It degrades, it becomes more and more unstable over time, and then eventually it just completely breaks. But yeah, I mean, I think your summary was pretty good. Like most apps in gaming, it seems to be at most a 2% drop in performance, which if this microcode does what it purports to do, that's not really bad. And if it stops the breakage and that's the extent of the issue, good job, Intel. You denied an issue for like 4 months and then tacitly admitted that it exists and then put out a microcode update that should have been out, before or should have been in the initial product. So I don't think there's that much applause to give to Intel, but well, as I said before, I don't really trust anything Intel says at this point, so I have no reason to believe that this actually mitigates the issues. And as you said, if it's still jumping to 1.55 volts, that's higher than what people used to be okay with. So yeah, maybe it breaks slower, but it's still reaching really high voltages. I guess it's not getting to what was it before, like 1.7, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think there were some that said it did. Generally, people say 1.6, but yeah, I think some people saw 1.7. If you, in a couple systems, if you look closely.
But yeah, I mean, most gaming apps are in CPU benchmarks, like Phoronix generally looks like it compiled a bunch of repeats in both just like CPU benchmarks and gaming benchmarks. So like Unigine superposition shows up several times, 3D Mark shows up several times, and the average is like a relatively minor. But some of them it looks like they're dropping 10, 15%. And I'm curious if it does seem to be the apps that cause the most voltage spikes. So that would make sense why those would lose the most performance.
I'm sorry, what was the biggest drop you saw in an app?
PyTorch, which I'm not sure.
Oh, right. I saw some people talking about that in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which is something I believe AMD does really well at now.
That looks like it was the biggest drop. That was, I think, around like 10%, 10-15%.
Yeah.
So not massive for one benchmark if that's the worst. But once again, we don't really know if this issue is entirely mitigated until we're 3-4 months out. Then we can really start speculating like if this actually did solve the problem, or as you said, if they quickly put out another patch because this is just a gap to try to quell some of the anger that they've caused.
Well, yeah, I mean, all this has felt like just what can they do haphazardly to try to fix things? And the first thing they did was put out the Intel baseline profiles that some people tell me may have actually made things worse because they just limited power, not voltage. And so you just had more boosting going up and down, yo-yoing. So that alone tells you they might just be guessing.
Yeah. I mean, the picture that's been painted to me over the past few months of how Intel has responded to this is that they don't know what they're doing. Or the best case scenario is they're too scared to admit what the issue is to actually admit that there is one. And that's not that much rosier of a picture. No,
I mean, how do you want to dice it? Whether Intel doesn't know, but they're not evil, well, that's worse. That means that who knows if anything's going to work that they're making right now. Whereas if they do know and they're hiding it, it's like, well, great. So that still means you can't trust them, any word they say. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to say about it. You know, the microcode update is pretty much exactly what I expected. I think there were some people saying they expected big performance drops. I was pretty outspoken that I'm only hearing single digit to negligible drops, which is what we saw. But I guess the final thing actually I will add here is, has anyone considered that most of the CPUs online testing this are reviewer CPUs that probably have almost no usage?
Yeah, that's not a bad point.
And therefore, because I've heard some people saying that the more degraded your CPU is, possibly the more performance you're losing from this patch. So there's a chance that a lot of people actually are going to install this patch and could have more of a drop. I'd like to see some testing of, I'd like like Matt from Alderon Games, who was just on actually, to send Gamers Nexus and Hardware Unboxed some of his CPUs that he has been running without a patch for 3 months, 6 months. Matt, I know you listen to this, I mean, send it and see if they'll agree to test that and if there's a bigger drop, because I think there could be. And then I want to see those ones that have been used for 3 months tested with this patch for a month straight and see if it ends up breaking, because that will tell us what to expect soon. All righty, let us now move on then to the final story here with story number 7. Nvidia Blackwell allegedly delayed due to design flaws. Now, first, I'm just going to put a tweet up here from High Yield, a friend of the show. The rumored Blackwell delay doesn't affect the gaming parts. They are most certainly not using COWOSL and thus are not affected by any packaging troubles. RTX 50 will release when Nvidia wants to release it. I don't know if it's delayed, but if it is, it's not because of this issue everyone's hyping up. I added that last part too, but that's what he was saying. And so, yeah, the entire panic about gaming Blackwell being delayed, which made all the rounds of the clickbait sites from the start, the reports of the design flaws, it was just hilarious. And some people were saying there's need for a lengthy redesign. No, this is for data center Blackwell, which is an entirely different architecture than gaming Blackwell. They use the same name. They're different products. And also, the issue is about using COWOSL packaging instead of COWOSS seen on prior GPUs. The difference is the S is the usual big silicon interposer, while the L uses small silicon bridges, right, embedded in polyamide organic interposers, kind of similar to Intel's EMIB. It seems NVIDIA underestimated the difference this would make and now has to redesign some of the top middle layers of data center Blackwell to work with this interposer. So, yeah, that has nothing to do whatsoever with the gaming cards. And, we'll get to it in the wrap-up. NVIDIA is cutting production of Lovelace. The only thing I can say about Blackwell, I did hear the professional Blackwell is being pushed back. I'd have to ask that source which version of it they meant. I think they mean the professional version of the gaming dies. Is that mobile Blackwell is coming out next year. Kind of seems like it's pushed back a bit. I'm really continuing to hear that gaming Blackwell is probably just end of year launch. And if it doesn't launch this year, it is not because they had to redesign the whole frickin' architecture.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. This to me mostly sounds like a issue that won't affect consumers that much, and I'm curious how much it will even affect like the data center space. Like, obviously, it gives AMD a little bit of an opening to try to capture more market share, but I would be curious the percentage of contracts are already filled, and it's just like, we're going to have to deliver this contract a couple months late because we need to retool, or TSMC needs to retool.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't really have that much else to say about this. Do you? I think it was just important because, again, a lot of misinformation out there on this one. Well, that allows us to get to the wrap up early, which is good because although these are stories that we don't think deserve a full conversation, they are stories that, well, there are a lot of stories. So the first one here, not much to say about this. Rogue River Forest confirmed, exclusively leaked by this channel. Now, Raichu, who I consider to be a reliable leaker, is saying that is also the one coming after Clearwater Forest. Yay for Moore's Law is dead. We got another one right first. Also, now this one might actually require some conversation here. Intel delays innovation event till 2025. I gotta say that tells me some product isn't ready.
I mean, I don't. Yeah. So, what product do you think it is? Like, because there's Lunar Lake, Arrow Lake, and Battle Mage, right? Like, the only thing it kind of has to be Battle Mage or Arrow Lake.
I would think Arrow Lake. I don't think Battle Mage is. I mean, that one's near as close to vaporware as you can be. So, I would think if Arrow Lake was ready to show off, well, let me look. When was the innovation event originally scheduled for? Oh, I think that's Arrow Lake. September. Yeah, that's Arrow Lake. Believe that's when I heard they were going. Someone told me that's when they were going to unveil it. I think that means Arrow Lake is having trouble. And again, despite the haters saying whatever they want to say, I've been saying, I don't know. I kind of hear Arrow Lake is going to be lucky to launch like December. So we'll see what happens. I still would be surprised if they don't paper launch something, but God, yeah, that tells me there's probably more issues with Arrow Lake. Great.
We'll get a benchmark as we're chanting Happy New Year.
Yep. It launched in 2024. How comical would it be if Battle Mage and Arrow Lake launch on the same day, December 31st?
I'll laugh. I'm not placing my bets on that because that would be too funny. But
in an attempt to make us have no break like Intel keeps doing at the end of every year when we're trying to take the last 2 weeks of the year off. Okay, next story. Nvidia allegedly cutting GPU production by 50%. Yeah, we already brought this one up. I've kind of heard that this is likely very true from my own sources. And, there's two ways to look at it. For sure, they're doing this for data center. But at the same time, I don't know. There is also that chance that they're like, I mean, remember, I leaked that I think it was they bought like the equivalent of like 2 or 3 generations of Ampere supply than the crash happened. And they'd already pre-bought more supply for Lovelace. So there's a very good chance that if they found a way to negotiate cutting production of this, or they said no, they're going to use it all for AI, good decision. They've already made they ordered way too much Lovelace. That's what I would think it would be. But it does also hint that Blackwell is not delayed like a year or something. They wouldn't cut this production if that was the case.
Yeah, unless they already have an ampere size overstock
of
Lovelace.
Which I guess.
But I mean, this just reads to me as they're reading the tea leaves and they know that it's time to start sundowning Lovelace as they introduce Blackwell, so they don't get another ampere situation where they're still trying to run through stock 4 years later. 3 years later.
Also, I saw this pop up today. Is this just a rumor? No, it seems like there's some veracity behind. There may be a 4090D 48 gigabyte gaming card launched in China. I mean, if this thing launches, there's no restrictions on Nvidia selling GPUs in China.
Well, is it slightly weaker than the 4090 they've put out, Tom? Because if it is, no restrictions.
No restrictions. And the U.S. is launching an antitrust probe into Nvidia sales practices. Yeah, I mean, I've heard from some people this could be very serious for them. I mean, we've long heard and reported on this channel about really shady, just consistently gray zone, borderline, like illegal antitrust stuff they're doing. I don't know. This one might be catching up with them.
Yeah, I mean, what they said that they're launching too. If they're doing predatory practices like saying you can't, or like increasing prices if you sell competitors' products, I think that's pretty obviously anti-competitive. So if they prove they're doing that, I hope they get punished for it.
All right, here's another interesting one. Xbox One failing from software. Did you look into this one in any detail? I probably should have flagged it.
No, not too much. I mean, I just saw that it's causing issues, or the newest software is causing issues for some Xboxes, or some base Xbox Ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I saw most of the discussion on this one was centered around was just there's a significant amount of Xbox Ones. The Xbox One S I'm reading here is unaffected. That just a lot of them. The thing is, we don't know how many broke. There's some people worried it could be a lot of them. And it's just a stupid software update. And I saw someone here, I see some reporting where they're like, this calls into question this idea of Microsoft being able to do a like software only cloud future for Xbox if they can just brick things with their software alone.
Yeah, that's really bad. And they aren't producing Xbox Ones anymore, are they?
Oh, no, no.
Okay, because I'm curious how you make that right. Do you like offer them a Series S? Or?
Well, you know, the way this works in the server world is, and the reason we still have some Zen 3 consumer products launching is that AMD continues to make Milan Zen 3 Epic. In fact, the guest coming on the show next week is going to talk about this as well, that Zen 3 Epic production is just still flying off the charts here. So that's why we're seeing so many Zen 3 products launch. I'd argue they should just have been binned into what exists. They can't really do that with a console, though. Like, have this safety stock. And even after people aren't buying Zen 3 Milan, my point was, well, they're still going to want to make extra to, be able to respond to RMAs for years with their customers that might have 5-year warranties or some deal signed. So I don't know if they did that for Xbox One. I think they usually do stockpile some chips and just keep them in a warehouse for years to service RMAs. But it's been a while. I don't know. I mean, honestly, what they'll just give them a Series S. You can't even sell them anyways. I mean,
that would be, if they don't have a stockpile, I don't know what else you could do. Because it would be kind of shitty to brick your customer's console and then say, well, it's out of warranty, so sorry. Because that's different. That shouldn't count. You broke it. I didn't do anything. Exactly.
It didn't wear out. I just give them a Series S or Xbox Series X. I hear you have plenty of those lying around. Next story, GDDR7 production in the third quarter. Again, I think what that tells you, quarter 4 Lovelace, and it's just a lot of things have been happening. Both them wanting to launch the 5080 first, which is not ready, so that means you have to push back the 5090 launch, and the focus on AI, so who really cares if it comes to gamers, GDDR7 production where it is. I think this thing's coming quarter 4, late quarter 4. Lunar Lake is launching September 3rd, Dan.
I'm excited, and I'm excited for their confusing names that they're not backing down on.
Yeah, they put in. Oh yeah, I think I cut that reader mail, but there's a reader mail saying, because I'm looking at the rumored Lunar Lake names, and it's like Ultra 9 288V. One of the questions was, do you think it's funny they're putting V for voltage now at the end of all their chips?
That is a very interesting choice, considering they've had a voltage issue with their CPUs
for several generations. Because 14th is its own gen. This is also interesting. AMD is hosting a Gamescom event in August 23rd. And did they say that, let's see, Gamescom, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Yeah, they're going to be talking about graphics cards, I think they said too. So there is a chance this is when they announced RDNA 4, probably for a Q4 launch. And they did that with the 7800 XT at Gamescom. I look at this and without any sources, I go, this could be the RDNA 4 launch or announcement.
It's a bit of a weird venue to do their announcements, because they usually have them at the more like techie conferences where they announce this stuff. But I don't know, the timing's right. Maybe they could announce it in Fortnite again, like they did that one time.
Fork Knife?
Yeah, Fork Knife.
They did do that, didn't they? Didn't they have a 7900 XTX in Fortnite?
I believe it was the 7900 XTX. It might have been
that or Minecraft, XTX. Maybe both. I'm sure that really sold them, AMD. All right, and there's evidence that Valve is working on a Steam OS purpose-built for desktop. I think that could be huge.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how well that runs.
They've had years battle testing Steam OS, making it optimized with all these features and support, dedicated support for games for the Steam Deck. I mean, if you told me all Steam games run on Linux perfectly or close to, and I consider it. I would consider that over Windows. Windows, I know, speaking of Windows, something that sounds like Windows, Wendell has been talking about Windows and how much like OneDrive is a disaster. Their safe boot, their like security boot features just destroy your OS half the time. And God, there's so many annoying freaking things. I'm using Windows 11 in the temporary system now. By the way, everybody, my desktop may be repaired, and I might get it within a week finally. Get that 4090 back up and running. But having to, and that will use Windows 10 still until they pry it out of my cold dead fingers in a year. Windows 11, there's some things about it that are faster and better, but there are some really insane, annoying things. Like, Dan, have you seen the thing on, you have a touchscreen laptop. Have you ever like tried to touch the side of the screen and then the stupid menu comes up?
Oh, yeah.
Why? We have the start menu. What is this for? And we also have a thing that pops up over here. Why do I need the other thing?
We need to keep making the UI interface with you so you don't have to learn how to work with the UI.
I mean, it's like I was really trying to like fast forward a movie by touching the touch screen on the dial, and it kept moving over the stupid menu. And I just had to plug my keyboard in and do it, or turn on a mouse. It was so annoying. I mean, God, man, if you can make it compatible with everything, Valve, I mean, I might actually switch to Linux. Seriously.
Yeah, I'd consider it.
Moonshine Octopus writes in, and he says, with RDNA 4, AMD changed tack from the presumably chiplet-capable Navi 41 to a monolithic Navi 48 die. What's the chance AMD are holding an ace up their sleeves? Apple released the M1 Max without revealing the Ultra Fusion, 2.5 terabit per second interconnect. Recently, Nvidia shared that Blackwell have 10 terabyte per second interconnect. What if AMD pivoted from an underperforming chiplet design of Navi 31 and Navi 41 to a 2 to 4 die fusion? Basically 0%, because nobody says this is happening. And I know OEMs that have like the early info they need to implement RDNA 4. Like they know the die, roughly the power consumption, so they can start working on the boards for it now. They don't have this for any big flagship. Furthermore, I'll let the cat out of the bag. I think it's probably safe for me to say this by now. I knew about the Ultra Fusion interconnect like half a year before everyone else did. But I'm sorry, my channel will get no views if I leak that, or at least that was my opinion of the time. And I have not heard of this from those same, well, I shouldn't say same. Yeah. From people in the know on what's going on with like design firms that work with these companies. A lot of them work with multiple companies, people. I think I would know about the interconnect if I knew about the Apple one, is what I think all I should say.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like, will they go back to MCM designs eventually? Probably, but not this generation.
Right, and a lot of the things they learned from the MCM stuff they did with RDNA 3 applies to CDNA now. It makes them a gen ahead in NVIDIA and how to implement this stuff. The market, they just don't think now is the time for a big GPU. So makes sense. I mean, I don't really think it was a mistake at all. It's just it was not a thing like Zen 2 where they're going to use it forever.
Yeah, especially with the MCM design that was in, I don't remember what die that was called anymore, but sounded expensive and complicated.
Let me see here. Nicholas Terroir writes in and says, Terroir writes in and says, what kind of memory is NVIDIA going to use on lower end Blackwell cards? GDDR7 or 6? Oh, I would say 6. I mean, I could, no sources, but yeah, at least the bottom die or two are going to use GDDR6, I would say.
Unless 7 is somehow cheaper than 6.
Which right I don't think is what I hear. Well, but to be fair, Dan, I don't think any low-end Blackwell will be out at the launch of the architecture. So Glass writes in, when people say they want value, they seem like they mean they want flagship performance at $500. Yeah, that's what people used to kind of get every gen, actually $400. Even with an AI bubble deflating, do you ever see the market going back to flagship? So 4090, 5090, 6090 for under $800. Personally, I just think gamers need to accept that $1,500 to $2,000 for the top card is being supported by the market, but they don't need flagship cards for gaming at reasonable settings at the same time. Well, I agree with the second part. I'm using a 7600 right now in my temporary system. It is fine, man. I mean, I can play games at 120 hertz. I either use FSR or dynamic res or just play at a lower. It is fine. And that is not the case. Like if you got a 7750 before instead of a 7970, I mean, no, you're running at a way higher resolution and you're just going to put up with frame rate drops to 40 or something, which at the time people thought as long as you're above 30, it's okay. But anyways, though, this whole, are we ever going back to that? I mean, my one word answer is no, but I do think AMD's trying to do that with RDNA 4. We'll see how it pans out. I don't think it's not going to be 4090 though. It depends what you mean by flagship. I think there is a chance it trades blows with the 7900 XTX overall for half the price of that card. So they're kind of trying to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't predict that the flagship is going to be $2,000 forever, or the tier one below the flagship is like going to be over $1,000 forever from Nvidia. Like maybe you'll eventually see an 80 class card come out for like $900 or something. But yeah, it's going to be more expensive from now on. And I think a big part of that is we're going to higher and higher frame rates and resolutions than we used to. And that just requires stronger hardware to drive that. And a lot of people just don't care about leveraging that. So I don't know. I think a 4K 60 FPS card is going to be in the $500 to $600 tier for a while. Like, I mean, I think we're kind of at that with the 7800 XT, or we're easily at that with the 7800.
4K 60, yeah.
Yeah, and if that's what you're fine with.
And if RDNA 4 is like 50% better than that or something, well, would it be 50? It might be more like, it'd be more like 30. I think 30 to, yeah. I mean, but with ray tracing, maybe 50. Yeah, I mean, then you're getting close to like a 4K 120 card for 500, and it's like, 4K 120, but yes, a few settings aren't ultra. I don't think people care.
I just think it's important to reiterate, like, remember what we're talking about here. When we're talking about the jump from flagship performance from the 7000 series to the 7000 series from AMD, we're talking about cards that would do 1080p, mostly 60 FPS, but a lot of the time back then when they were saying 60 FPS, they meant it kind of is 60 FPS on average, but it drops all the way to 40. And now people are talking about flagship performance. They want 4K 120 hertz plus in every game. It's different.
Yeah, if I go look at, because this is one of those generations you remember very well, the HT 7000 series. I mean, I can just let's go to Battlefield 3. That game was a pretty middling game in terms of like how hard it was to run and which hardware it ran on well. In 720p, the 7870 was 136 frames per second. Pretty sure that's what I get with APUs now. And then if I go to 1440p, 28 frames. Yeah, you're right. You remember correctly. 1080p, 65 frames per second. And yeah, man, the 7950 wasn't that much stronger.
Curious, that's so funny. What are the like 1 in 10% lows if that's reported?
Oh, they didn't even test that back then. They didn't even test it. It wasn't even a thing. And then everyone got Crossfire and probably had the worst lows ever, but big EPEAN number they could, do stuff to. But yeah, so if you look at that difference there, 2030, yeah, I mean, the difference was a 7870 is just not doing 1440p, and it's probably holding an average of 60 and 1080p, but it will drop sometimes. And this is high settings, not even ultra in 1080p we're talking for this. Meanwhile, the 7970, that was what was required to really even kind of get 1440p. Like, it'd have to be like overclocked, hard, toxic edition 1440p 60. So it's just not the case anymore. Right now, I have a 7600 that is easily doing 1440p with almost all ultra, all the time above 100 frames a second. And this is a $200-something card. So I think, it just becomes this thing where if you want the higher performance, these companies are deciding, well, it's going to take a 600 millimeter squared 4-nanometer die with an insane amount of bandwidth to get you there. It's going to be expensive, but the people that really want it will pay for it. Meanwhile, it's hard. Most people are probably pretty happy with a $400 to $800 card. Quick Jumper writes in and says, hello guys, do you think AMD can keep up with Nvidia with their CDNA products? I know they revealed they will have a yearly cadence of releases, but won't the products become more or less small iterative improvements? No, that's not really what I'm hearing. I mean, look, Nvidia is doing Blackwell, then a refresh of that, right? Because they have like whatever it is, like the GB200 or something like that, I believe it is. And then, of course, whatever it is, like H200 is what I'm thinking of after H100. AMD's doing pretty much the same thing, a refresh, CDNA 4, then CDNA next. So they both seem to have a yearly cadence, and AMD's trying to be like 2 months quicker in their cadence. And after these Blackwell delays, kind of seems like they're going to keep up with them. Although NVIDIA's in the lead, I was worried about Rubin because I was told Rubin's going to try to come out early next year. We'll have to see what happens. Was it early next year? Yeah. We'll have to see what happens with Rubin because now they're going to have to just delay it. If Blackwell launches, we'll see. I still want to be surprised if Rubin is in the second half of next year, and then Blackwell data centers at the very end of this year, which is still a quick cadence. But I think with the delay of Blackwell data center allegedly, like you got AMD, they've got a chance of catching up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, just based on past release cadences and with their CDNA architectures, I don't know, it doesn't seem like AMD is really falling behind. They definitely haven't surpassed NVIDIA yet when it comes to data center, or especially AI, but I think they're keeping up from what I can tell.
Yeah. All right, Dan, that is all of the reader mails, all of the questions. Wow, I don't know. I said I was tired, but I think we actually kind of flew through this one, given how much news there is.
We came in hot this episode, I think.
We're coming in hot, baby. So, I mean, I don't know. I'll just end it right there. Then, I mean, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe. Remember to ring the bell button. So if you're subscribed, you actually see that upcoming content. And also make sure that you comment below for the algorithm, like us, share the video. Sharing the video or podcast helps so much. Subscribe to Broken Silicon on your podcast app of choice. Give us a review there as well. And do please consider joining the Moore's Law's Dead Patreon. We just had a die shrink come out. And so there's a whole other hour of Zen 5 discussion there. I think we went into some things in that discussion too that we didn't go to here to not be redundant. So if you missed it, it still should be interesting for you. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Get ready for some 9950X videos, I'm sure, soon.
Oh, yeah.
As well. And Dan, any last words?
No, I don't think so.
All right, then. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for listening, and have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugada as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong, we love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferrier, Valco Malev, Jensen Wang, Gregor S. Hacker, Sarcastro, Toka, Chris Rich, Compressed AI Blocks, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Booma, Shredbird, Holden Mobley, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boss Haas, Jonathan, Franco Frederick, Jake 223, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Chrysantine, Christopher A. Butler, Stephen Hart, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Nithra Zink, Mad, Zoot Suit Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Ishad, Mark Rademaker, James Anderson, Cole Addick, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, D313337 Antics, Michelle Pell, Jamie Witters, Hexapuma, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Jeff Sedler, Windstar, Mai Sharona, Corey Leonard, James I, Raider, JSMMH, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Pulse Media, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Win Wang, Dave Schultz, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, Jofit, Brian Scanlon, Harlan, Jansen Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushba, Himsa Gung, Meal Valverga, John, Sisyphus, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Brian Wright, AC, Alex Vega, Dr. J. Mad, Freedy, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal Joe, Elbergun, Jola Martina, Kikum, Solarized 80, Gian Violi, Matthew Marlowe, Thalo 215, Jeffrey Gentleman, Lord Starscream, Brian P, Hudat 42, Cornstar 671, Penta Winter, Rowan McKickey, Sprutnik, Angel of Cake, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Curry King 3, Porcelain Oats, Nick Zismania, Sakosha, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.